Coming up, we continue our conversations with this year's Indigenous MacArthur Fellows, this time learning about a scholar honored for their contribution to hula. Plus,
it's wrong, it's immoral, it's unethical, it's embarrassing.
A small university owns up to its responsibility to return Native American remains stored on its campus. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
The ICT Newscast is sponsored by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, a nonprofit organization serving American Indian nations and people in the recovery and control of their rightful homelands. On the web at iltf.org.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aliyah Chavez. We start today in Maine, where the Passamaquoddy tribe at Sipiak has removed its leader for the fourth time in 7 years. Chief Rena Newell served less than a year in office and had been the tribal representative to the Maine legislature. It is not immediately clear why she was recalled. Under the tribe's constitution, Vice Chief Umpwikas Bas Ahas Bassett becomes the next chief-elect. However, they could choose to remain vice chief, which would signal a new election. The tribe is set to meet next week to determine its leadership. In Alaska, research shows that salmon are spawning in Arctic rivers. The findings confirm that with climate change altering the natural habitat of salmon, the fish are expanding into new territories. A project at the University of Alaska Fairbanks discovered that despite Arctic conditions typically lacking salmon habitat, the effect of climate change on the environment have allowed the fish to adapt to the region. According to the lead researcher of the UAF project, Peter Wesley, climate change is declining salmon populations in other states like California, but the Arctic could be an ally to the fish species. Alaska Native communities have an important connection with salmon, and their new regional presence could affect harvesting and fishing practices. Wesley, who studies shifts in salmon habitat, says new salmon populations found in the upper North Colville River means the community will need to develop new relationships with salmon in the state. Now to South Dakota, where students are taking action to stand up for a cause they believe in. Over 100 students at Washington High School in South Dakota have walked out of class, calling attention to the lack of action over the MMIW crisis. The Bureau of Indian Affairs Missing and Murdered Unit has a caseload that only covers a small fraction of an estimated 4,200 unsolved cases nationwide among American Indians and Alaska Natives. Indigenous people account for 3.5% of missing persons in the U.S., which is 3 times higher than the overall population. Government officials also expressed frustration about the epidemic and say that jurisdiction as well as racial injustice are root causes. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. We turn now to Ute Territory, where in the Rocky Mountains, where a small university is working to return 25 ancestors it has sitting in museum file cabinets. They have been stored on the Western Colorado University campus since World War II. ICT's Stewart Huntington has the story.
In 2018, a new state law in Colorado changed the way institutions needed to account for the native human remains and other cultural items they had stored. At Western Colorado University, that prompted a reckoning with NAGPRA, the 1990 federal law mandating return of remains, as Western has 25 Native American ancestors in file cabinets that need some peace.
For me, there's a moral imperative to do it. It's the ethical thing to do. It's the right thing to do. There's no reason for these individuals, these remains, to stay in our cabinets here in this museum. They belong home.
The university received a grant from the National Park Service to ease the return process. That grant kicked in October. Now 4 tribes, the Southern Utes, the Navajo, the Hopi, and Zia Pueblo, are working with the institution to find the right home for the ancestors. Something that can't come too soon for Indigenous members of the university community.
It's painful, to go into that museum and know that when they open a cabinet and pull out a drawer, that someone's ancestors are there. Like those are the ancestors of people, and those people are deeply cared about, whether we know which tribe or nation they were affiliated with. So for me, the whole starting point is just that when NAGPRA was enacted, Congress recognized and declared that human remains of objects of, cultural significance must at all times be treated with dignity and respect. And also that they belong in the care of, lineal descendants, tribes, nations, Native Hawaiian people. And when you see individuals in any museum or lab that I've ever been to, ours included, no matter how respectful or secure the manner of storage is, it's not dignified. It's not dignified for one skull to be arranged with other skulls on a drawer that pulls out in a metal cabinet. And that to me was painful and shocking when I found out that's how we had ancestors stored. It's even hard for me to call them remains, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it's hard for me to call them remains. They are our ancestors. And they're individuals who are worthy of and deserve a proper burial among their relatives. They should be among their people, or at a minimum, at least among people who care and who want to take care of them and respect them and give them a proper resting.
The ancestors were donated to the university in the 1940s after being dug up by a Durango, Colorado man named Peterson. For years, the items were decorously referred to as the Peterson Collection. That language is being challenged.
Now, Peterson was someone who lived down in the Durango area and, for lack of a better word, to be quite frank, looted a whole bunch of sites around Durango, Cortez, down in that area in the 20s and 30s.
Don't you call Peterson a collector? He was a looter. He looted those graves. He wasn't collecting, he was looting, and we need to use the language that helps people understand that what he was doing was patently wrong.
Western Colorado University isn't acting in a vacuum. These issues need facing all over the country. I asked if Western could be an example for others.
If other institutions are unsure about what to do or how they should do it, then, maybe this helps them make that decision. I don't know. It's not for me to say, I guess. But being difficult shouldn't prevent you from trying and going forward. And, I'll probably make mistakes and say the wrong thing occasionally as I go through this, but it has to be done. It has to be done. And we think it's important that folks understand, we have these things. We don't want them here anymore. We want them home. It's important that folks understand what we're doing and this history and this process. It's wrong. Absolutely. It's wrong. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's embarrassing.
I was reading something. Her name is Dr. Veronica Passfield. She's a Ojibwe. She's with the Bay Mills tribal community. She said that the right to protect the graves of your ancestors and relatives is one of the most fundamental rights on the planet. We all respect across the globe and nationwide, how people handle burial, what the time frame is, what the ceremony is, how people's remains are put to rest. And so it's interesting to me that it's taken this long to recognize this for the first peoples of this continent. So I guess as an Indigenous woman and a leader in higher education, I just think it's critical work and we have to push it.
At the end of our visit, I asked Ms. Taylor if she were happy the university was finally taking these steps.
So am I happy? I think when there's resolution to it, and those ancestors are somewhere where they can be at peace, I might be happy then, but I think I'll always be sad. Like, it just makes me, the hardest part is that they're over there and I know where they are. I talked briefly with someone about, could we do something? Could we remove them from that space and put them somewhere else? Could we build a special box? Could we do something? Like, it'll be a while before I'm happy. It's very emotional and it's difficult for me. I am proud of the work that's being done, and I guess I'm grateful. Maybe that's the word I am. I'm grateful that our institution is engaging.
Reporting from Carbondale, Colorado, Stewart Huntington, ICT News.
The grant Western Colorado received spans 2 years. Campus officials say they expect the repatriation process to be completed before then. Called the Genius Grant, the MacArthur Fellowship awards individuals for exceptional creativity and promise for important future advances. Patrick Makuakāne is one of those being honored for uplifting Hawaiian culture and history. Here's ICT Shirley Sneve with the interview.
The luau is a traditional Hawaiian feast, often a tourist attraction that features the hula. I asked Patrick Makuakāne if it's the real deal.
Well, that depends, because I do what you probably saw at that luau, and luau's are so much better than they used to be. They're much better in terms of coming from a more authentic place. So I do that, as well as things that you probably wouldn't see at a luau in Hawaii. Yeah. So I mean, we're known for our innovative approach, but even just as important to us is our traditional approach, because we carry both.
Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this dance.
When I was a young man, I joined a Hawaiian club at school, in high school, specifically to learn Hawaiian songs to sing at our family luau. And when I got there and I told the instructor, I don't want to dance, I just want to sing. And he said to me, in this group, you sing and dance. If you don't like it, there's the door. I was like, oh, okay. So after 2 weeks, I was hooked. I really felt a connection to this dance, and that it would lead me to other important cultural aspects that I previously, it was unknown to me. So, and that's hula, because it's the most expansive and expressive of all the Hawaiian arts. It's like 30% dance and 70% culture. There's so much more to it than people would even imagine.
So let's talk about San Francisco. How did you decide on San Francisco?
I fell in love with somebody, and the idea was I was going to move here for a year, and he was working at a very expensive French restaurant, and we were going to save the money and move back to Hawaii. I was a 23-year-old young gay man, and I moved to San Francisco, and after a few months I thought, oh, I don't want to move back. I want to stay here for a while. But the thing that was holding me back, that I wanted to move back to Hawaii for, was hula. And I decided, well, maybe I should start teaching over here, and I can have hula over here just for a while. And the longer I stayed, the more I decided that, I would make this my home. Although Hawaii is always home, this is where I live presently. But I felt that there was a need for a qualified teacher, because there wasn't really anybody who in San Francisco at the time who really was a qualified teacher, because it was so new back then. Not that I was, but I came from a very qualified teacher. So that opened a lot of doors. I was a poser for a little while. And it all worked out. And I would have never, ever even imagined that, and that was almost 40 years ago, that not would only hula survive, but it thrives here in this place. And that's one of the wonderful things about hula. It has a tendency to thrive in really unusual places. So San Francisco became a place that was really welcoming and liberating. It allowed me to sort of unshackle myself from a few traditional tenets, always holding them dear, but really letting me experiment without anybody looking over my shoulder and saying, what are you doing? That's not right, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I do owe San Francisco a lot in terms of allowing me a certain freedom of expression and creating a place where I can cultivate community.
I really appreciate what you've done with the hula. I mean, it's like all cultures, we
Right.
evolved.
Right. And we're all grappling with this. I was a former creative director, not creative director, yes, I guess so, creative director for the Ethnic Dance Festival, which has, because, you know, the Bay Area is home to over like 90 unique cultures. It's amazing. Everybody is grappling with tradition versus innovation and evolution. How do we move our culture forward, but yet still retain those important tenets that make it our culture, you know? But we have to move forward and make it relevant to today without losing that nucleus of who we are. So I think we're all grappling with it and trying to find that road that works for us. It's a good challenge to have.
San Francisco has developed a fairly sizable Hawaiian population over the years.
It's huge. It's a really large population. And so people use hula as a vehicle to keep them, or a bridge to keep them connected to Hawaii. Those expats, they come to hula, never would have taken a hula class while they lived in Hawaii. Didn't even appeal to them, or they didn't even think about it. But coming here, it's like, well, if I take hula, then it gives me a chance to touch base back home. And they're so surprised that it's really a connecting force to keep them attached to home, and takes away that bite from missing home. Hula really opens the door for a lot of people in that respect.
You said you learned this in school. You learned hula from school. What about your family? Was there a tradition of traditional practices in your family?
Nothing. None whatsoever. My grandmother was of the thought, and many people in her generation felt the same way, that we're American now. So in order for us to get ahead, we have to take those Hawaiian things that we learn, we just put them in the back, and we need to like learn how to speak English well, learn how to like behave in that sort of Western American way, because otherwise, you know, we're going to be left behind. And so that's what she decided to do. And I totally understand that. Many people in her generation did that. So that's why I started hula, because I recognized, wait a minute, this is a place that's going to teach me about my culture and allow me to express my identity in a way that nothing else was available to me. And that's exactly what it did. I sort of brought culture back to my family because of my involvement in hula. I think we need to reframe this conversation around tradition, which usually posits tradition as a static symbol of culture, clinging to norms and protocols and behaviors that are cemented in time. But nothing could be further from the truth. Traditions are fluid and they're ever changing. And, you know, they're a dynamic reflection of the culture that adapts to changes in its physical, social, spiritual, and philosophical environment. These things do shift over time. And if it doesn't adapt, then it doesn't become flexible, then it's doomed, right? So I think it's healthy and necessary for those of us who are in the mix to reflect, to ask important questions such as, does this ceremony, etiquette, moral stand, etc., work for us today still? You know, and if it doesn't, do we recreate another version of it? Or does it make more sense given the space and time we find ourselves in? Or do we just let it go? You know, the interesting thing that I grapple with sometimes is we're busy fighting the patriarchy or misogyny out there. Let's look into our own culture. And is there anything that feels familiar to us about that? Or are we just holding on to whatever that is because it's traditional? That's what we know as our culture. Do we have the right to say, hey, you know, this feels a little bit funky? Maybe that worked for that time, but are we able to say that, well, you know, women can be deep sea fishers, because in traditional times, it was the domain of men, you know. So there's important questions I think we need to ask ourselves. And hula is always a reflection of its environment, literally. The movements come from the wind and the rain and fragrances that you find in your natural environment. It's drawn from that. So I'm living in a very different environment. So I want to draw from movement and music that comes from this time. So I feel like I'm part of the innovative spirit that our ancestors always were a part of, because you're just like manifesting all this power and beautifulness that comes from your relationship with your environment. It's all about your relationship with your environment.
Our heart goes out to the island of Maui and the tragedies that they've had.
Yeah. You know, that for me, it's like from now to the end of my life, every time I think of Maui, that's going to be part of the equation. Every time we dance a song or sing a song for Maui, that's going to be part of it. So it's really tough. I don't think there's so much that's going to result from it. And a way for us to try and take the land back to what it was, but fighting those big business interests, right? It's going to be really difficult. But I am encouraged by a lot of younger Hawaiians who are like scholars and who are legal advisors who we didn't have 20 or 30 years ago, right? So now we're going into these Western institutions and we're arming ourselves with that kind of like information so that we can take care of ourselves rather than let that be used against us. So I have hope, because of these people.
Patrick Makuakāne is one of 3 Indigenous artists honored this year by the MacArthur Foundation. You have likely heard of the Gila River Indian Community if you have ever visited the Phoenix Valley. The people of the river are an alliance of 2 tribes, the Akimel O'odham and the Pee Posh. This nation has a storied history. In recent decades, it has found lots of success in gaming, beginning in 1993 when the tribe signed its very first gaming compact. I had the chance to visit the newest property recently with my colleague Nick Parks. Take a look.
So we broke the mold when it comes to casinos for Santan Mountain.
Gila River Gaming Enterprises seems to have a knack for finding the perfect place to build a casino. Of the 9 casinos in the Phoenix, Arizona Valley, Gila River owns 4 of them, all located right off major highways. Their casinos are just pieces of the puzzle for the state as a whole. In June, Arizona's Department of Gaming reported that tribally owned casinos contributed over $2 billion to the state since 2004. Here in Chandler, the newest casino in the state is surrounded by lots of empty space, but the tribe could one day decide to add a resort or an entertainment district.
I think there are endless opportunities.
Blake Katz-Nelson is the general manager of the Santan Mountain Casino.
We've got the mountain views, we've got the open and airiness, and I think that's what people really enjoy, is that it's not just a dark casino where all I can do is gamble. Oh no, this is a place where I can have a fun experience. I'm entertained, I'm having fun, we're laughing, and we're hanging out.
There are almost 1,000 slot machines here. Actually, it's 813 to be exact.
Yeah, so obviously we're owned by Gila River Gaming Enterprises, so we're one entity, right? But the tribe owns that entity. So all of the revenue that the tribe gets come from the casinos. So all their schools, their housing, their safety services. When they pick up and dial 911 and that police officer or that fire engine shows up, that's because of the revenues that they've been able to get from these casinos that are in operation. The other thing that people don't necessarily know is that the state benefits from that as well. So there's a percentage that goes back to the state. So even if you're, down the street in Chandler and you call 911, a part of those services are part of what the casino has to offer up in regards to revenue. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Just about everything here is new, from the carpets to the water fountains, and it was designed to feature art from the Akimel O'odham and Pee Posh people. When you first walk in, you are greeted with a large chandelier created by community members. On the walls, there are these murals representing the 7 regions of the tribe.
The cool thing about it is each entrance actually faces one of directions, which is northeast, south, and west. And in the Gila River Indian Community culture, those are color-coded. So if you come to our north entrance, that entrance is blue. If you come to the east entrance, that entrance is yellow. And sun rises in the east, so that is yellow, and the sun sets in the west, so that side is maroon. So it kind of all plays a little part into the property, which is an awesome story. It's something our team members were able to tell all of our guests as they arrived on property, is all the cool little things that we had.
The property is also unique in the way that it gets water and electricity.
For the water here, we drilled a well, so there's a water reserve underneath. So our water is completely from that well. The electricity comes from GRICUA, which is Gila River Indian Community Utility Authority, so it's their own utilities.
Casino officials tell me their biggest claim to fame here is their sports book, which for you non-gamblers is basically a place where folks can bet on major sporting events like the latest NFL game. They get to watch the games on this 130-foot LED video wall where they can play just about anything. It is the largest of its kind in the Phoenix Valley.
The sportsbook is the only other thing that we have a big claim to fame. So if you walk by, our sportsbook is the largest casino sportsbook in the valley. With our partnership with BetMGM, we really knocked that one out of the park. And thus far, when we hold UFC fight nights, in which we show all the UFC fights, or just with football season that just started, we're seeing that sports book at full occupancy on Sundays and Saturday nights. So it's been a lot of fun. I think that is the other wow factor that we show here, is that when they walk in and they see that sports book, it is the coolest place to be.
Reporting from Santan Mountain Casino, Aliyah Chavez, ICT News. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.